He came from nowhere, a boy from East London surrounded by concrete, debts, and the feeling that real life always happened on the other side of the glass. He grew up kicking a ball between two rusty posts, looking at the Canary Wharf skyscrapers as if observing another planet. And one day, he entered the glass tower, sat at the billion-dollar desk, played with the sharks and won. This is the true story of Gary Stevenson, the trader who predicted the collapse, bet against the system, became a millionaire in his 20s, and then simply left, abandoned everything. But why? What makes someone leave the top when everyone around is fighting to climb higher? What did he see that no one else did? And more importantly, why did he choose to stop when he could have had it all? In this video, you will enter the mind of one of the brightest and most human traders who ever worked inside Citibank. You will understand how the system breaks people while profiting from their bets. And maybe, just like him, you'll start to see the market in a different way. All the information you will see here comes directly from the book The Trading Game, written by Gary Stevenson himself. No fiction, no invention. Just the raw reality of someone who lived at the top and decided to leave before losing himself. And if you want to dive even deeper into this journey, the link to get the book is in the pinned comment below. Let's begin. He was born in a place where dreams seemed like something made up by rich people. East London was not the setting for blockbuster movies, nor a place where investors were made. It was more like an urban survival field, with rusty posts, dilapidated buildings, and streets where progress never passed through. Gary grew up among invisible limits. Those that don't appear on maps but tell every child, here you can't dream too big. His world was made of overdue bills, parents who struggled in silence, and a neighborhood where every penny counted. But at some point, maybe between one kick and another of a deflated football, or during a casual conversation with his father about math, something ignited. A discreet but determined flame. The idea that he could break the rules of the game if he understood better than anyone how the game worked. And so began an invisible journey. Gary studied, observed, listened more than he spoke. He didn't have the contacts, the last name, nor the social codes of the elite, but he had something you couldn't buy. The ability to learn fast and see what no one else saw. Getting into the London School of Economics was not just an academic victory. It was an act of silent transgression. For the first time, he was surrounded by people from another world. Children of bankers, heirs to titles, young people used to traveling on vacations to places their families would only see in magazines. And he, with simple clothes and a strong accent, had to infiltrate that ecosystem like a secret agent. For many there, university was a social rite. For him, it was a survival and conquest operation. That's how he arrived at Citibank. Not as someone chosen through connections, but as the outsider who passed every stage because he couldn't afford to fail. Inside, the environment was another planet. Phones ringing nonstop. Screens flashing like a jungle of algorithms and numbers. Desks where billions changed hands with a single call. And in that chaos, Gary realized no one there was smarter than him. Maybe they were more confident, more articulate in the refined English of private schools. But when it came to understanding market logic, he saw patterns others ignored. He bet against the consensus, read between the lines of macroeconomics like deciphering hidden codes. And when the data started pointing to the 2008 collapse, he saw it before the others, while economists smiled for the cameras. Gary smelled disaster, and instead of fearing it, he bet on the fall and won. In the first year, his bonus was so high, he didn't know how to react. Not because he didn't want the money, but because no one had taught him what to do when suddenly you earn more than your whole family ever had. It was a bitter, silent victory, as if he had passed through a portal and now found himself in a place where he didn't belong. Even though he was celebrated, the office celebrated, bosses smiled, emails came with congratulations and promises of a meteoric career. But inside him, something didn't fit. The bank balance grew, but the sense of belonging diminished. Going back home felt strange. Showing that he now had money felt like a betrayal. And at the bank, he was still the boy from East London, only now wearing an expensive suit and pretending to know how to behave at corporate dinners. Success isolated him. He wasn't born rich, nor was he poor by current reality. He was in limbo, and that limbo forced him to dive deeper into the market, as if there he could find a new place to exist. Trading became everything. The chart, the logic, the curves. The movement of rates, the way interest rates revealed the mood of the world, all that made sense to him. It was the only place where he could be judged by results, not by accent or appearance, and he was good. Very good. So good that he became a reference for older colleagues. He earned respect, but also too much attention. And with it came the weight of constant performance, the fear of making mistakes, the obligation to always get the next move right. He began to understand that the market doesn't reward those who are right. It rewards those who endure. And there, just over 20 years old, Gary began to pay the price for being too right, too early. He predicted the collapse, made millions, but the more he earned, the further he drifted from who he was. Meetings became theater. Praise turned into traps. The bank rewarded him as one would chain a rare animal, with generous bonuses. But in visible cages, he could buy whatever he wanted, but he couldn't leave. He was trapped by an expectation he himself created, to always be brilliant. And it was there, still early on, that the first crack appeared, not in the balance sheet, but in the soul, because the invisible boy had beaten the system, but now needed to discover what that really meant. Because it's not enough to enter the castle if you still feel outside. And he was inside, but alone. What began as a personal victory gradually turned into an invisible trap. Gary had predicted the biggest market move in recent years. He bet against the economy when everyone still believed in the recovery. He made a fortune from the collapse. That feat made his name legendary in the halls of Citibank. He was not just a promising trader. He was the wonder boy, the poor boy who beat the rich at their own game. But the problem with being the brightest in the rooms is suddenly everyone expects you to shine forever. And the market, like life, has no patience for those who falter. What followed was not a series of celebrations. It was a silent escalation toward exhaustion. Gary began to realize the bonuses he received were not rewards. They were chains. The more he earned, the more trapped he became. Trapped by the expectation to repeat the feat. Trapped by the pressure to deliver results that justified the millions. Trapped, above all, by the illusion that it all still made sense, but it no longer did. And what began as an intellectual challenge started to corrode his body, mind, and identity. Decisions that were once made with clarity became filled with doubt. The instinct that once seemed infallible now trembled under the weight of never making a mistake. The transfer to Tokyo was supposed to be a new chapter, a promotion disguised as opportunity. But there, far from home, without family references, without true friends, and with a stagnant market, he plunged into a void that even the highest numbers couldn't fill. Work no longer demanded genius. It demanded only presence. Being there, occupying a desk, pretending he still made a difference. The yen market had stopped. The volume evaporated. And for someone who lived on movement, stagnation was unbearable. What remained was the Japanese corporate theater. White shirts, restrained smiles, meetings where nothing was decided, and reports no one read. On the outside, he seemed fine. Young, rich, expatriate in one of the most advanced countries in the world, but inside, everything was collapsing. His body gave signs, stomach pains, critical weight loss, sleepless nights, medicines that didn't work. His soul screamed for something real, but the world around answered with silence, bureaucracy, and rules. He tried to distract himself with the local routine, with forced karaoke nights, with bars where he spoke hesitant Japanese with strangers, with solitary bike rides through neighborhoods that seemed pulled from a dream. But it was all escape, and deep down, he knew he was losing himself. At the office, the futility was suffocating. No one gave him concrete tasks. No one expected anything real. He was like a decorative piece, a trophy the bank kept to show they still owned him. And what was once passion turned into indifference. Economics, which had once been his map to understand the world, now seemed like a broken picture, unable to explain the pain he carried in his chest. Ignored emails, distant bosses, forced smiles in meetings, all contributed to the feeling that even having won the game, he had lost the meaning. Small attempts at reconnection, like drawing the Beatles, studying Japanese, talking with the waitress who didn't speak English, taking lessons with a masked lady, were no more than short breaths in a deep sea. Loneliness became the rule. Loss of interest in food, physical exhaustion, constant fear of being watched, of someone wanting to bring him down, fueled a silent paranoia. Gary began to feel like a prisoner of luxury, where the cell was his own badge, and the sentence, his intelligence. The bank no longer needed him, but also did not want to let him go. And that was perhaps the cruelest blow, because there he understood he was not irreplaceable. He was just another gear too expensive to discard without caution. Plans to leave were sabotaged. HR ignored his requests. Bureaucracy grew like an invisible wall. The promise of freedom became a labyrinth of clauses. And even when he finally decided to break free, he realized leaving was harder than it seemed. There was always one more form, one more document, one more condition. And above all, there was fear. Fear of losing everything, of being sued, of tarnishing his name, of going home as someone who didn't finish the race, even though he had already won. And it was in this confusion of feelings that he began to lose his mind, writing daily emails to management, deliberately provoking bosses with words mixing despair and challenging the bank's logic with biblical ironies, sarcasm, and a rage so real it overflowed the messages. With each ignored response, he got closer to the limit. His health worsened, isolation increased, connections with the few people who still cared weakened. The city, once a mysterious refuge, now seemed like a prison with neon lights, and it was there, between silent corridors and lonely cafes, that he understood the true nature of success. It was about what you lose along the way. Gary had gained everything the market could offer, and in the process had lost almost everything that made him human. Tokyo, with its cold beauty, became the final stage of the fall. Not a public, scandalous fall, but an intimate, devastating fall. The fall of someone who saw too much, understood too much, and could no longer pretend it made sense. Citibank was no longer a bank. It was a machine, and he, even having beaten that machine, was now just another broken gear. And it was in that condition, fragmented and tired, that Gary began to think about the way out. Not as an escape, but as liberation. Because he had understood what few can see. The market doesn't just break the weak. It also breaks the geniuses. And sometimes, the price of being too right is losing everything that really matters. At some point, it was no longer about money, nor about career, prestige, or performance. Gary's life had become a kind of battlefield where he fought not for achievements, but for sanity, for identity, for some glimpse of freedom he could still find within a system that seemed designed to drain the last drop of energy from those who dared to see too much. He was no longer the East London boy trying to win. He was the man who had won, and now was paying the price for discovering what was behind the curtain. In Japan, time seemed to flow slowly, as if the clock had been sabotaged by some invisible force. Days at the office accumulated without purpose. The spreadsheets given to him were useless. The bosses did not speak to him. The emails he sent disappeared into silence. Gary's role at that point was simply to be there, present, seated, visible, but invisible at the same time. It was a subtle form of punishment, a corporate sentence disguised as routine. And for someone who had bet billions and moved markets, that irrelevance hurt more than any loss. His health, already weakened, continued to deteriorate. His body sent warnings, unexplained pains, bleeding, constant fatigue. Sleep came in lapses, and spare time was filled with obsessive exercise, nostalgic drawings, conversations with strangers, and Japanese lessons that felt more like therapy. There was a deep sadness at the core of every activity, as if everything he did was trying to cover a hole that kept growing. And even with all that pain, there were moments of lightness. The silent gesture of the intern leaving an onigiri on his desk, a silly conversation with a waitress who barely spoke his language, a class with a math teacher who taught him more than verbs and nouns. Small breaths in a sea of suffocation. Gary wanted to leave, but the bank would not let him. Each attempt to resign was met with a new demand, a new obstacle, a new labyrinth of bureaucracy and ambiguous clauses. The promise of an American charity that might have allowed him to leave his position without losing his money was sabotaged. The application was rejected on a technicality no one could explain. In truth, no one even tried. Superiors vanished. HR pretended not to understand, and the silent message was clear. You were trapped. The game he had won now shackled him with invisible bonds, and every attempt to escape seemed to strengthen the cell around him. Yet even amidst this sophisticated captivity, there were flashes of rebellion. Gary began to move. He began to provoke, sending emails to senior management filled with irony, biblical quotes, and sarcasm. speaking of justice, principles, and values that no longer existed inside. And he knew he was poking a hornet's nest. But it was that or losing his mind completely. He had nothing left to lose. Or perhaps he had lost everything and was only now realizing it. At the height of chaos, Gary experienced a dangerous clarity. He began to understand that the system did not hate him. He was simply irrelevant. The machine had turned against him not out of revenge, but indifference. And realizing that hurt. Because it showed that even having been the best, the most profitable, the brightest, he was just another one. Replaceable, silenceable, forgettable. And it was at that moment, in the middle of Tokyo's suffocating summer, that something changed. An unexpected email, an invitation to talk. The HR chief called him with a smile in his eyes that didn't match his face. And there, in a long and quiet conversation, without big words or emotional confessions, just a gesture, a look, Gary understood he had won, that the fight ended there. There was no celebration, no warm farewell, only the silent relief of someone escaping a war no one saw happen. In the last week, he worked symbolically, arriving at 9, leaving at 5, walking around the office like a ghost, finally to be freed. Listening to the sounds of the trading floor, the noise of keyboards, nervous phone calls, coded conversations among men betting billions as if playing cards. And there, amidst it all, he felt no envy, no nostalgia, no resentment, only clarity. And that clarity hurt more than any wound. On the last day, he said goodbye discreetly, thanked the silent intern, packed his things, looked one last time at the building that had been both prison and stage for years, and left. He did not ride his bike. He walked, crossed the Imperial Palace gardens, feeling the sun burn his back and a slight neck pain that was not physical. He thought about everything he had lived, the people he met, the betrayals, the silences, the wrong advice, the lonely successes. He thought about Frog, who said he would run out of money, about Arthur, who believed the system was solid, and about himself, who bet on the collapse and won. They were all right. They were all wrong. Because in the end, the game was never about being right. It was about continuing to play. But Gary no longer wanted to play, and that was why he left. Because he understood the system's greatest trap is convincing you that you only have value if you keep playing. If you keep proving yourself. If you keep running. He saw the future, profited from it, understood the price, and chose to stop. Because true power is not in winning the game. It is in having the courage to leave the board when you realize the prize is not worth the cost. Gary Stevenson was the trader who saw the future, got rich, and had the courage to leave the market before the market swallowed his soul. He didn't break financially. He broke emotionally. And that break, contrary to what the system teaches, was liberating. Because in the end, the real collapse is not in the charts. It's in living a life that is not yours. And true wealth is the ability to choose when to stop. That was the price he paid for knowing too much. If you want to dive deeper into this impressive story, just get the book The Trading Game by Gary Stevenson. The link is in the pinned comment below. All the information you saw in this video was taken directly from his work. No fiction, no invention. Just the raw reality of someone who played the game from the inside and came out alive to tell the tale. If this video impacted you, maybe it's time to look at the market with different eyes and rethink. Do you still want to play this game?